men's life expectancy is literally tied to do you have friendships or not. Any man watching this, if you rely only on your partner, your life partner, man, woman, whoever that is, for all of your expression and connection, your life expectancy is no better than if you were completely alone.
Yeah, so what do you think it means to be a good man? This is the fourth official Pod Talk podcast for Under the Hood Talk.
Wow.
Really excited to have Mark Greene and Mark Wiedmann here in the studio with us today. Both have done incredible work in the men's space. Mark Greene writing and thinking about it for a long time. Author of Remaking Manhood and co-founder of Walking Talking Men. And Mark Wiedmann, similarly a co-founder of Walking Talking Men. And we'll dive into the organization and the work that you guys do. And I want to hear about the things that you've learned about male friendship, the loneliness epidemic, the man box. So we have a lot to cover. So just want to say thank you for being here and sharing your time, and really excited to introduce you to the Under the Hood Talk audience. I just want to give a brief moment for you to introduce however you see fit. I have my very short Wikipedia sentence, but I'm curious if there's any particular way you like to introduce yourself and why you're interested in this work.
Sure. Well, I was a senior editor at the Good Men Project years ago, and I remained that. And when we started writing about men's issues and whatnot, 20 years ago, we called ourselves the conversation no one else was having. And now everyone's having it. And I think we're having it at all levels of society, both in terms of the epidemic of male loneliness and disconnection, which has been, researched heavily. And we know that 56% of people in the U.S. now, based on a Cigna study, feel sometimes or always alone. And just to level set for that, if you have that level of loneliness in your life, and many, many men do, many millions of men do, women as well, non-binary folks, we're all facing that. If you have that level of loneliness, the health impact is equal to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So it's higher levels of heart disease, cancer, all that stuff. And the solution, of course, is having friendships in your life, real, genuine friendships. But the culture, the larger culture of masculinity inhibits that. So that's the baseline of my work and has been for a long time. And this new idea to maybe make some friends is born out of that.
Awesome. Yeah. Anything to add? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm mostly riding on Mark's coattails and all the amazing work that he's done. But, I've had my own personal journey, experiencing a lot of what Mark just described. And, I'm a lifelong software engineer, and, I can fully admit that tech is part of the problem, sometimes, and does some amazing things and allows certain groups to make connections, but also does foster a little bit of, loneliness among people because, digital connections have some positives, but often can leave us feeling a little bit lonely and whatnot. So, as I started to notice that really drew me towards, some of the work that Mark was doing. And as we became friends and realized that some of the connections that were missing in my life and, first our coffee, chats and evolved into these walks. And it's just taken off from there.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I'll save it for later, but I have an interesting tangent about I also work in tech and telehealth therapy. And so the in-person connection is really interesting to me because I work so much on facilitating online conversations. But we'll say that for later. But,
sure.
I want to hear how Walking Talking has evolved. I know you felt this urge, this impetus to do something in person. What was that beginning like?
In 2021, a group in Great Britain started doing this, and they're called Men Walking and Talking, and it's .org or .net. You can look them up, and they have a whole thing. And I remember reading about that back then and thinking, no, that's cool. Mark and I have kids who were in the same high school a few years ago, and we began having coffee, or we went to have coffee, and we had another one and another one after that, and we started having conversations regularly, like once a week. And I think by now, 3 years, I don't even know how many years, 100 or more conversations.
At least.
And what began to emerge out of that ongoing, regular talk is that we started talking about things that were a little bit more significant. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon, I'd show up one day for coffee and I'd say to Mark, I saw this movie last night. It was really cool, and it's a good Western, and we'd talk about that. Another day I would show up and we got to a place where I could just say, I'm kind of crashing today, and I don't even know why. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what's going on. And he would hold space for me to sort of explore a little bit about what might be happening. And it's different when you feel it and admit it to yourself than when you are able to actually talk to someone else about it. And this particular kind of conversation is actually extremely rare. We can talk to therapists. We can sit in a men's group and talk. There's all these sort of facilitated conversations with someone else who's a facilitator or an expert or whatever. But to talk to a friend about something we're struggling with, that's just not so common. Maybe for younger men these days, they may be growing a little more of that capacity. But for men of my generation and for millions of men, we're very careful about what we share. We're like, I don't want to tell so-and-so about that because he may joke about it later. It may come back, whatever. But I found with Mark that over time, there wasn't any aspect of myself that I didn't feel comfortable bringing forward and sharing and talking about. And that was the gift that came out of our meetings. And I knew from all the data and research that I'd done that, men's life expectancy is literally tied to do you have friendships or not. Any man watching this, if you rely only on your partner, your life partner, man, woman, whoever that is, for all of your expression and connection, your life expectancy is no better than if you were completely alone. There's research in Niobe Way's book, Deep Secrets, which is Niobe's book, Deep Secrets, is the Bible for what we're talking about today. And if you don't know the book, it talks about boys' friendships. And she's been interviewing boys for 30 years. What does your best friend mean to you? And in early adolescence, boys say, I love my best friend. They say two things. I love my best friend. They use the word love. And the other thing they say is that without my best friend, I would go crazy. Hold that for a second. I would literally my mental health would decline dramatically. And then by late adolescence, boys are getting hammered by this message from our larger culture of masculinity, what we sometimes call man box culture, which has a set of rigid rules. Don't show your emotions, be a breadwinner, not a caregiver. If you talk to other men, talk about sports or cars, nothing deep. Be tough, don't ask for help, have power over women and girls, be heterosexual. Those are the rules of this culture of masculinity. Hammers away at these boys with those messages. And then the boys cease to be concerned about this close connection and authentic expression. And instead, they become concerned about proving what they are not, which is, based on her research, little kids, girly, or gay. I am not those three things. And so they disengage from those close friendships by late adolescence. And their suicide numbers become 4 times that of girls. We culturally break boys' connection, snap it in half. And then we put them in a competitive hierarchy, and that's life for us, right? So the crucial thing that men need to understand is that a conversation with a friend, and this idea of walking and talking and forming friendships in our own neighborhoods, which is the purpose of there's a goal of getting men to do for our little project, is radical. It is a radical act. It literally overthrows the entire cultural system that's designed to put men in competition with each other, to make men fearful of revealing what's going on for us, and to isolate us. And it's not some guys, rubbing their hands together saying, let's isolate men. It's the system that has been born out of sort of ideas of what a man has to be. And when we're ready to change that culture of masculinity, by shifting what we think is appropriate for a man to do or be, then it'll shift. And I think it's shifting now.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully captured in explaining the link between the system and then the individual effects felt at the downstream, and then how something wildly simple is really much larger than that, because it breaks the predominant narrative of like experience-based friendship, where you have to be doing something to like under the guise of conversation. The video game conversations or the poker conversations, it's just spending time with another guy, a friend, and sharing.
And eventually having, God forbid, 5 or 6 friends.
Yeah.
There was a Harvard study, 75-year study, maybe longer now, of happiness, quote unquote. And what they discovered was, do you have 5 men, 5 people that you could call at 2:00 in the morning in crisis and they would take your call? And the other thing that I think that gets lost sometimes, and then I'll finish with this sort of trying to map the larger cultural reasons why men are lonely, is that this culture of masculinity is so ubiquitous. It's the water we swim in. It's the air we breathe. We get taught what it means to be a man in man box culture beginning at a very early age, 2, 3, 4 years of age. Judy Chu wrote a book called When Boys Become Boys. And she said by 4 years old, she was embedded in a pre-K class for 2 years. She followed this group of kids, boys and girls, non-binary kids, presumably. And what she discovered is boys are already beginning to hide their emotional acuity and take on this sort of stoic performance of masculinity that is required if they're going to be part of the boys' club. And boys want to belong. They want friendship. They love it so much. And they're told, yeah, you can be a member of the club. There's just a few rules, you know. And then a few years later, we're so far in that we've already begun to hide authentic aspects of who we are. And the reason the man box culture is a problem is not because of traditional masculinity. For some men, being a provider, you know, is fine if that's what their partner wants to agree to. The idea that some men are a little more stoic, or great. The problem, man box culture shows up when you begin bullying and policing all men who arguably are on a vast spectrum of versions of masculinity that fits for them. That some men may be more emotional, some men may be more femme. There's a vast range of what it means to be a man. And in our culture, everyone gets policed into this narrow performance. And it's that bullying and policing, it's actually the enforcement that's the point, because that reinforces the dominance hierarchy. So I try to reach out to communities of men who have been radicalized, and I say, brothers, you have every reason in the world to be angry, because for years of your life, whoever you were authentically, whatever parts of you didn't fit this man box culture, got attacked and assaulted until you decided to hide them. And maybe you've hidden them so much that you don't even remember them anymore. But the tension that creates, the frustration and isolation, has created this anxiety and anger. The isolation is the source of it. But the thing we're never allowed to admit in man box culture is that this wasn't actually done to us by women. This wasn't actually done to us by DEI or wokeness or any of the rest. This was done to us by the men and boys in our own lives. And to admit that would be to admit that we didn't win that dominance game. So it's a rage and frustration. And I'm telling you, friendship is the cure for a lot of that anxiety and loss and grief. And trust me, I was in the man box for 50 years. I didn't go do my men's work with Mankind Project till I was 56. I spent decades trying to win at that game, and always feeling like something's wrong. So this little thing that, and you ask how Mark informed the beginning of that work. He and I had coffee, we talked, we formed what can only be described as a loving friendship. And then late November, I said, there's this walking, talking men thing. I'm thinking about doing it, but I don't really want to. Feels like a lot, and I don't know who these guys are going to be. And Mark just said, no, we got to do this. So that one friendship seeded me with the courage to go ahead and try to do the walking, talking. And now I'll pass the conversation off to someone else. Thank you for letting me share that. All of that.
Incredibly helpful
important
to map out. I'm curious how your kind of progression, both through like learning through this like more academic lens of this the men's work and the writing and the network mapped onto like your own personal journey. Like, did you feel? Were you learning about this and then living it, or were you living it and then learning? Was it simultaneous? Like, how did you kind of balance like the work and the research part of this, and then like how it impacted your own personal life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I had sort of begun my own personal journey around, we'll just call it like personal growth and wellness and whatnot. Large part, and thanks to my wife, wonderful wife, for encouraging me in those areas, as she, I think, could sense that there was something, missing, in my life, and that I needed more connections outside of her, as Mark alluded to earlier. A lot of men often rely on their partners for that. So I started to do, a combination of, meditation and journaling and just, getting in touch with myself and some therapy and whatnot. And, started to realize that, something was kind of amiss. And then when I started to get together with Mark, and we were having these conversations, it pretty quickly started to dawn on me that, something is different here. This is a different type of connection. And then I started to look at some of the other relationships in my life. For instance, you mentioned earlier that a lot of times men will get together and it's always around something, whether it's poker night or, I had a gaming group, for instance, where we got together in person and we play games, and, and I really like those guys and everything, and we have a wonderful time. But I realized I formed that group because I wanted connection, but the gaming becomes the thing, and we get there and there's a little catch up at the beginning, and, and then we sort of dive into what we're doing. And, I considered those guys good friends and everything, but it was very different than what I was experiencing with Mark. And then it just dawned on me like, I am missing, like, this is more of a real connection, and that's not to slight, my gaming group is, those guys are great. And I think since I've kind of learned that, we have changed that a little bit into having a little bit more authentic connection. But that was, it was like getting hit over the head with a sledgehammer, that, this is what you're missing. It finally like just dawned on me that, and it's very simple things. It's just, but it's hard. It is being a little bit more vulnerable, with your friends, and not fearing that they're going to laugh at you or be like, oh, what's going on with Mark? Mark and I always joke that growing up in my family, there was, I witnessed it, with my own father. And, he was very, very funny guy, very funny dad and everything. And, but, we probably never like super emotionally connected. And anytime there were conversations that got a little deep, his move was he'd be like, all right, well, anyway, as a way to shift the conversation back to, so I always, whenever, Mark will say something heavy, I'll be like, all right, well, anyway,
The running joke,
okay, so that was, like Mark said, that was what I learned. So the message that I got from that was that these things are not okay, that we keep it light, we keep it fun, we have a good time, we go for drinks, we go to parties, we get drunk. The closest thing I ever had to like a deep connection was probably one of those stereotypical, where you've had a bunch of drinks and you've got your arm around your friend, I love you, man, but that's not real. That's, like a drunken connection. And, so then to, kind of, it's embarrassing to say, like, I'm, 52, and to experience this like so late in life, I'll take it better late than never. But, that I've kind of realized that it's hard to admit to yourself that you've been kind of missing that a little bit, or your relationships weren't as authentic as maybe you thought they were. So,
And what is that moment like? Because I know, because I think about this too. Like it's scary to take stock of your own life and just take inventory of the deep connections that you have. And avoiding that is easier in the short term because it's uncomfortable. What is the push to, I got to do something about this?
Well, can I ask you, what's your experience of it? You're a younger man, and I know that my son's 19, and I see him connecting in a different way with his friends, but they're intentionally doing it, I think. And so I think there may be a generational shift, but what's your experience of it in your own life?
A little bit of both. I would say there's a larger network of my friends that are, we connect on various things that we do, whether it's exercise or soccer, rock climbing, like one of my hobbies, or, and then I also think I lean very heavily on my family for the emotional support and connections, which is an amazing thing to have, but is also makes it less like urgent for me to foster those relationships in my friendships, but is completely important, especially because I also think as families age, everyone kind of builds their own lives, which is an important part of like growing up and being independent and building your own life. And so I think I've made some efforts like, all right, let's sit down and do like one-on-one, just dinner. And it's kind of structured like that, but it's helpful to just make sure there's no distractions, and it's just a catch up, and you're actually talking about life.
So I'm curious, when you look at the range of friends you have, are there some guys that you're like, they're more like in a place where they'd like to do more of that, connect a little? Yeah,
I think so. I think there are some friends I can just sense like are more open to having a deeper connection than just hanging out.
Yeah.
And staying at the surface level. And
so we can all look for that in our circles and say, it's not like you go to the the local alpha male and be like, let's connect. Yeah. I mean, there's a degree of self-protection in these calculations, right? But what's interesting about Walking Talking Men is we didn't go to our friends and say, let's do this. We put a post up on Reddit, Upper West Side, and I just wrote a little bit about social isolation and said, we're going to do this walk. Join us if you want to. So men self-selected in who were already thinking about this. Like Mark said, he had been thinking about the fact that he can't rely only on his wife. We got a lot of emails from guys saying, I've been talking to my wife about this. I know I need to do something about this. But but making friends is hard.
Yeah.
There's no way to do it. And I think, to Mark's point earlier, you join, a D&D group, it's going to be about the D&D unless someone intentionally tries to shift it. And some men may be like, we didn't come here for that.
Yeah.
But this thing is, and there's no rule that you got to, say something deeper on our walks. There's not, that expectation does not exist. But it seems to happen because walking doesn't really, we don't, well, today I put my left foot in front of my right foot in front of my left foot. I mean, walking's kind of automatic, You're not there to talk about the walking. Yep. So other things emerge. And the other thing that I just want to put out here real quickly is, it's not lost on me. We got 3 white guys sitting here talking, right? And the culture of masculinity, such as it is, I speak to it from the positionality of my history as a white guy, growing up primarily with other white kids. And I'm not here to speak for men of color. I'm not here to speak for other communities, other religious communities. Those communities can have a vastly different set of intersecting influences. And I'm just going to say it. I see black men on the street in New York greeting each other in really warm ways that I'm not seeing white men doing so much. So I'm speaking from the positionality of white guys. And that doesn't mean that there isn't deep isolation in other communities. There probably is. But I'm here today to talk from the position of my community. And we have a particular way, whiteness culture has a particular way of doing status and control and policing and all that. So to you other folks out there in the world, we would love to have you join our walk. We're open, but we got our own set of problems, white men, and we're doing our own version of trying to work through them, you know?
Yeah, it's an important call out and disclaimer for just speaking from the experience of how you have lived your life. I mean, it influences how you're taking these steps now, which are in particular addressing the problems and issues that you have seen and identified in your own lives and your own research and reading. So it's completely affected by the community you're in. So I appreciate the call out. So I'm curious, in the dynamics of the walk, what is the energy you're fostering? I'm sure everyone is different. I'm wondering, how would you characterize it?
Yeah, that's great. One thing that I want to react to something that Mark said there about one thing that's great about the walk is that, I talked about I had a gaming group and other people might get together at a bar and watch the game. When you're doing the walk, that distraction or the thing that it's centered around is gone. And it's funny to witness how powerful removing that thing is. You're just walking. There's no game to look at. There's no, 3-pointer just hit to distract from, a man who's maybe trying to shift the conversation a little bit deeper. You're sort of forced to just engage with whatever people are bringing up. So I just, want to call out how powerful that is, and, people, even getting together for coffee, it doesn't always have to be a walk, but something about the walk, the energy of walking, really just engages the brain, gets the mouth moving. My wife and I have even found with our kids, if you're sitting around the dinner table, how was your day? Fine. How's school? Fine. You get a lot of these, one-word answers and they're, waiting to, sort of finish dinner to run off. But if we take them over to Central Park and just, they sort of jokingly call it a mandatory walk, but you get them over there, first 10 minutes, it's a little quiet, somewhere around the 10 or 15 minute walk, they just start talking, and sharing things from their lives and everything. So, I don't want to gloss over how powerful the walking aspect of it is. So we get out there on on these walks, and the energy is usually it's very good. New men who will show up. Of course, there is some initial, what do you do? Where are you from? And some, kind of get to know you stuff, because even in this environment, it's still hard to, you can't just ask a deep question. It's the first time you meet a man. There's a little bit of some barriers that need, comfort levels that need to be established. But I've been surprised how quickly, I've walked with, say there's 5 or 6 people there, it tends to naturally break up into groups of 2 or 3. So you might, walk with one man or another man and, sort of in front and behind each other. And pretty quickly people just, start sharing, it's maybe not the deepest secrets in their lives, but it's, there's a lot of things especially, men who have children, that can be a really hard period. And it's really hard to talk to your spouse about I'm struggling with this right now. The kids are eating up all my time. I'm tired. I come home from work and there's if one partner is staying home, you sort of hand me the kids and I got to do bath time and everything. And and fathers, want to do those things, but it does, it's okay to admit that it's hard. It is you're used to going from having a lot of time to yourself and, maybe being a little bit selfish and having all of this time with your partner. And then suddenly, this newborn comes into the situation, and it's, we talk about on the men's walk that sometimes there are the unmentionable things, things that you feel like you can't really mention to your spouse because they might react
because
poorly.
they're carrying their own load.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want to hear you saying, this feels like too much.
Yeah.
Especially with young kids. One of the guys that came on our walk, he was the primary caregiver for his kids, and he said he was getting angry at him. And he didn't really, and he's starting to really be worried about that. These are kids that are 4 and 6 or something like that, and our response was, because we have kids in college now, was, A, you're not alone in that. We have all experienced that. For a couple hours on a Thursday, parenting is just too hard. It requires too much of us. It's too demanding. They don't, you have to set your own stuff aside, which is actually the growth curve of parenting. And it's boot camp of 101 for becoming a more, for decentering yourself, right? That you want to get taught to decenter yourself. Have an infant.
Right.
It's like, a small child does not particularly care if you're tired or if they need what they need. And the other thing we said to him was, you can't say that to your partner because they've got their own load they're carrying, and you can't really say that to the other moms at the PTA, but you can say that to us here, because in this space we won't shame you for feeling those things, and if you want some advice, we're not here to fix stuff for each other, right? We're here just to listen and sort of be a witness to that. And also, when you have something that's driving you a little crazy, that you have shame about or frustration, and you speak it out to someone else, in the moment you speak it, it changes. And then you get some support around that. You feel like you're not alone in that. And this is the thing, our culture of masculinity is at its core a silencing culture. Don't admit you're struggling. Don't admit you have this or that or the other. We have men, maybe not so much in this generation, but certainly in my generation as a young man, the things we hide, we have men hiding their sexuality, that they were gay, for decades in their life. I mean, imagine going through your entire life hiding something that substantial. But we also hide little things. We hide the kindnesses we do for our wives. If you're at the bar talking to the guys, you're not going to tell them these little gestures of kindness you do for your wife, because they're going to be, oh, dude, you're whipped, And this is the small policing. This is the small and big policing. And so when a man comes on a walk and says, we speak the unspeakable, right? To say something. And on that same walk, I admitted I'd had a fight with my wife that morning, and I felt really disgusted and kind of ashamed. I felt it in my body, right? It was just like this sense of, God, why did I do that? And I don't think I was, and then I began to ask myself, why am I having this overreaction? People fight. What's the deal? And so we unpacked some of that in that same walk. But I just want to say, first and foremost, the walk is not about that kind of conversation. That kind of conversation comes out of the walk. We're not, okay, let's all do, emotion porn for each other. It's not that. That's not the idea. And for any man considering going on a walk, there are no expectations, including even showing up. I've had guys email me and say, okay, you're doing the walk? And I say, yeah, 10 o'clock in the morning, 93rd and Central Park West on Tuesdays. And I'll get an email 4 weeks later from the same guy who never showed up. Y'all still walking? Like, yeah, we're still walking.
Still go.
I think culturally, men are sick and tired of being signed up for stuff and billed for things and click here and do this and do that. And it's in part because of social media. Social media, we live in a culture and a society where the data clearly shows that men are driven into isolation. We're trained not to share what's going on for us. And that's not just by other women. That can be by women, too, who are like, no, what are you showing me these emotions for? I don't want to see that. So culturally, this idea of the man box, a lot of women have taken it on, too, about men. But it's a silencing, disconnecting culture. And the challenge for us as men is to even begin to broach the possibility that we're going to go on a walk with other guys and just be who we really are. But that's the walk. And so men instead get sold back on social media, I'm going to create connection on Facebook, right? And for decades, we've been clicking on likes and, I saw your family picnic photo, and all that stuff is fine. And the work you do to create healthcare connections online. These things are all important, but they do not replace these friendships we had as young boys when every day we met in school and talked and shared, and the joy of that. I think every single man feels that loss and the grief of that, which got arguably, based on the data, based on the research, beaten out of us. Mm-hmm. So now we're going on a walk. You don't want to, you want to sign up and maybe say you're going to come and then not show up? Good for you, brother. Don't come. It's okay. Jesus, can we just have one thing in our lives that's natural, right? and that includes telling men, come when you're ready. Show up when you want to. Say what you want. Don't say anything. Just listen. Just feel what it feels like to walk with some other guys who have admitted to themselves that they don't want to spend the rest of their life with no friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was smiling just because I'm thinking of something I saw online, and it was a similar vein, and there were some comments like men discover friendship, and it's things that are so simple, like sitting in a living room and talking or going on a walk, and it's so simple and it's so dumb, but it's like you said, radical, because
it's incredibly radical.
But it's just so, it's mind-boggling because it's such a like dichotomy between like how simple the act is, and if you look at it on its face, it's just what, like, this is.
How did we get the most fundamental part of what we are as human beings broken?
Exactly.
How did that shit get broken? And when do we say to ourselves, finally say to ourselves, this disconnection and this anxiety that it creates has been with me for decades. Don't wait as long as I did. And I don't need to do it this way anymore. Mm-hmm. And this organization, Men Walking Talking. Wait, WalkingTalkingMen.org.
Yeah.
We have a little website. It's like 3 pages. We have a little form letter where you can, if you don't know what to post on social media in your neighborhood, whatever, you can borrow the language from that. We have 4 rules that we follow. You don't have to follow them, but our rules are no politics, use I statements, listen with curiosity and avoid judging, and then it's private conversation. But once a man decides to do a walk, we have a walk in LA now, a guy named Jonathan Jacobs is doing. We have a walk in another part of California, and we have one starting in near Chicago. And once a man starts a walk, that's his walk. It's not my walk. I'm not like, okay, well, let me see what you're saying, and let's get in here and manage. It's not my walk. You need a walk. You make a walk. And if you want to do some rules, do them. If you don't. But if every man who feels that anxiety, just that little edge of like, I miss what it was like to have friends, just did this in their neighborhood, you walk by a building. I know a man behind that door now. I know him. He's a friend of mine. I have friends now in the Upper West Side of Manhattan that I didn't have in November because of this walk. And I had a guy say, I'm going to start a walk. I got some guys who might want to come. And I'm like, yeah, well, you invite the guys you know to come, but also post on social media. Get men showing up that you have never met and do not know. It is a shock to realize that there's a guy 5 blocks over who has already had the conversation. I need to make some friends. I need to do this. And that creation of suddenly just a blooming of connection in your own neighborhood is what we had as young boys. Mm-hmm. It's what we had. And we don't have to grieve for it. We can just have it now.
Yeah. Like how awesome was it going over to a friend's house and hanging out? It was the best.
And guys who you can just say, hey, I decided to go for coffee in an hour. You want to go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a big like, why not? It's like superpower. It's like powering. Who doesn't want more friends?
It's incredible. It's so simple. The idea is so simple. We're never going to charge. There's no like click here, PayPal. There's none of that. We don't want a man's network. We don't want a man's money. We just want you. We want you to come on a walk. If you're in my neighborhood, I want you to come on a walk with us because I might like to know you. It might be good to know you. And men just aren't used to hearing, we just want you.
And what's nice is the barrier for entry is really a lot lower than, somebody might be listening to this thinking, oh, I want to go on a walk, but now I feel like, maybe I have to show up and share something about myself. But honestly, the best gift that you can give on a walk is just listening. And that's actually like one of the hardest things to learn, or something that I really learned from spending time with Mark, is that truly like listening and not just waiting to talk, and just holding space, for someone, and resisting the urge to advise or to jump in or to relate it to something, relate it to something in my life, or to fix. That I find like 90% of the time, just listening and holding space and just, like making it clear that I hear you, I understand you, that's most of the work, like right there. So if you're thinking, you can just go on a walk and just be like, hey, I'm just going to hold space and listen today. And that's fine. We've had people do that. And,
I laughed when you started, because I was like, imagine me shutting up for a minute. But
so it's the power, that really is the secret power of it, is just holding space and listening. So,
and that's what we did.
Yeah.
It's not like we're affecting something.
Right.
This is what we did as boys.
Yeah.
This is what Niobe Wait's research shows. If I didn't have my best friend, I would go crazy. It's not. They're literally sharing what's going on in their lives, those young boys in early adolescence. They're talking about what's really happening, and they're relying on each other for that. But also, I had a whole walk with one of the guys recently, and we just talked about animation. He's a guy who's in the animation business. And we were just talking about, oh man, I've been watching this show or that show, and boy, and that's also the joy of the walk, right? It's not. Sometimes you just want to share what you love. You just love this thing, and that's the biggest part of friendship, is to share the joy that you have in the things that interest you, right?
Yeah.
But the conversations just weave through different things. And you'll hear a conversation going on a couple of feet ahead of you, and you'll be like, oh, I'm just gonna, let's go, what do y'all, the idea that we as men, the idea that men don't have rich, heartfelt experiences of the world, that they don't carry grief and joy and confusion and happiness, that they can share, can bring to friendships, the whole part of who they are. The idea that we don't have that is the biggest lie out there that men tell each other, and that sometimes women tell men. The idea that men are unable to do this, Judy Chu's research shows that these boys begin to hide it when they're 4. Relational capacities, the ability to create and care for relationships. But the other thing her research shows is that it's not gone, it's just not used. But any man at any point in his life who wants to turn that switch back on, all it requires is the opportunity to do so. And men's work is one way to do that. And I am here to say men's work is sacred and important, as is going to a therapist, all these other things. But this idea of friendship, this simple, radical idea, is over here. And it's that big, empty space that we feel in ourselves. And I've been writing and talking about men's social isolation, and I've been isolated. And realizing that this big, empty space needs to be filled, no matter what my work is, no matter how my marriage is, no matter how the rest of my life is. You fill this empty space, and it informs all of that. Those things fuel each other. And without this engine of connection and friendship, everything else suffers, professional, all of it. So here we are. We're going for a walk, and we want friends in our neighborhood. And every man out there deserves friends in his neighborhood. And all you got to do is post on Reddit or Nextdoor or Facebook and show up and walk.
Yeah, I have a bunch of good questions that have popped up now. I'm curious. I'm curious about the barrier that is, I don't need this, and I'm also, I guess let's start there. Like, I think at least for me, I think I feel a knee-jerk I could sense a knee-jerk reaction. I don't need this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I got friends.
Yeah.
I'm
And
fine.
right now we're going for the men who do know they need it, who are also alone. Like you're standing on the boat. There's a bunch of guys out in the water. You've got the life preserver. The ones who are screaming, throw it to me. Why don't we start with them?
Yeah.
Like throw it to them. But also they will create ripples of change in the relationships around them. Other people will notice a change in them and say, "What? Oh, well, I'm doing this thing. It's kind of cool." So there's an echo effect out. Let's not mince words. It's not, I don't need this. Certain percentage of men are, that's weak shit, what you guys are talking about. That is weak, woke garbage.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with men. You guys are ruining masculinity. You're ruining what it means to be strong and tough and a leader and a protector and all those narratives. And I say, nope, I'm actually becoming better at those things. I'm becoming better at being a protector because I'm protecting the men around me from the idea that they can't bring their full selves. I'm protecting the women in my life by getting energy from other sources and bringing it to them instead of always asking them to look after my emotional needs. And more importantly, I've become a more fierce advocate for men to show up as who they are. One of the things I've had to learn on these walks is to break a very old habit that I had. Growing up in man box culture, conforming, all that stuff, one of the secret ways I tried to create connection was to look for myself in other men, look for my biases, my point of view. If I can find men who are enough like me, my politics, my interests, whatever, that'll form a friendship. That's also a terrible, terrible outcome of that culture, right? Find conformity in order to find connection. Now I know that I meet men and I say, look at your way of doing this. This is fascinating. Like some men are kind of more analytical and more like, well, they stay in their head more. And, this journey from head to heart, back and forth, you can watch them do it in a much more sort of thoughtful, paced way. You can find men that, I got a hedge fund guy who's a friend of mine now. This man is arguably, his politics are not my politics. But I see him loving the conversations about the things that we find mutually interesting. And I'm like, I had to set aside a lot of bullshit in my own head about how different men can be and still be someone that I can love. And that's my learning. That's my fucking growth. And we all have been chopped up and put in silos and kept apart. And it started when we were young. And it is the toxic thing is not versions of masculinity. Those are all beautiful. The toxic thing is saying there's only one right way. And the other toxic thing is that guy over there, he couldn't possibly like me. He couldn't possibly love me for who I am because I'm not like him and he's going to judge me. All of these things are the lies that this brutal fucking culture has taught us. And friendship blows all that up. It just, the walk blows all that up.
Yeah, I think on the walk, it's funny that, a conversation may start, but I find that, it's, again, something about the power of the walk tends to distill it down to what are the core emotions. It may start as a conversation about, having children. I feel like I don't have a lot of time for my hobbies, or I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. And then by the end of the conversation, not by anybody, asking any particular questions or anything. It just sort of comes out that, maybe it's based in a little fear that I fear that I'm not being a very good father right now, or something like that. And that's something
I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, I don't know how to do this,
or
I'm not a good father, or I'm not being a good husband. And there's, so now we're getting down to the fear of, where this conversation, why this conversation is coming up. And anybody can relate to that. It doesn't matter what your politics are or where you're coming from in life. So these conversations tend to lead to a lot of common themes. And, especially after you've been on them for a while, it's amazing. You're like, wow, this must be what therapists feel after, being in the business for a long time. You're like, oh, all these problems are kind of the same, but that makes them more relatable.
Yeah. And when you say it to someone else, it changes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not doing what I'm afraid I'm not showing up the way I need to as a father for my young children.
Yes.
I finally said it. I said it to someone. And to have a man look back and go, I've absolutely been there. Absolutely have. And you need to let that be part of your experience as a father. It's okay to feel that. In fact, that's probably a good sign. Guys who don't feel that are probably the ones who are maybe missing the boat a little bit with their kids. And I would also suggest that the degree to which we go on a walk and talk to our friends, this, for me, Mark and I have had 100 hours of conversations or more. When I see Mark, I see every version of him, because over that time, eventually he shows up tired, he shows up joyful, he shows up exhausted, he shows up. I mean, I've had conversations where we've talked about just movies and stuff. What are you watching lately? What's going on? Other conversations I've shown up with him where I've said, man, I'm crashing and I don't even fucking know why. And I'm a little scared, that this is going to be my life now, because I've had a health scare or I've had some other thing, some real thing. And he just holds space for it. So now when I see Mark, I love him, I care about him, and I don't have to ask myself, what does this guy need from me in order for me not to overwhelm him or not be what? I'm the guy I describe myself as the guy with the cage with the screaming monkey in it that's in me, right?
I love the screaming
monkey. And I'm like, I just got to manage my fucking monkey today while I be a person, and that's like, that story is my story. And there are people who'd be like, well, you could go do some somatic therapy and get that out of you. And I'm like, yeah, my monkey's my bro. I'm not letting go, But the idea that when I'm with Mark, that's okay. And he loves me in spite of it. He loves me like every friend I ever had. These other men are new. I've had 5, 6 walks with these men, and I already appreciate them, and I've already learned about their lives. But the other message I want to give men here is you're trying to get to 40 conversations. I just pulled that number out of the air. But when you talk to these guys on a walk, when you become a friend to someone and you have conversations and they begin to see you on different days in different ways that you are, something new emerges. And this is the thing that social media doesn't give us. This is the thing that casual chats at work don't give us. This is friendship, the weirdly simple, radical idea that our friends know all of who we are. And so the other part of talking men is we're setting up the conditions in which you can be in conversation with people over the course of your life and form this thing that I have it with Mark. I know from the data I need 4 or 5 relationships like that, 4 or 5 friendships like that. I need them or I'm going to die earlier, literally. I mean, I appreciate you, Mark, but you're not going to keep me alive. I need a few more. Yeah. I love you, brother, but damn, the metrics here of what used to be community and used to be the village and used to be all that, we're going to recreate it because, God damn it, the modern culture took it away from us so it could sell us back connection in consumerism and sports and whatever, all wonderful things. Let's all go buy a new dishwasher. Good. Enjoy that.
Didn't you get a new refrigerator recently?
I did. But we're not going to trade it for that community, that love that we used to have and that we're hardwired for.
But tell me about, so there's the system, and I know it's geared against these friendships. Where do you place the individual accountability to go after this? Is it a readiness factor? Is it a need factor? Is it like what is the individual accountability to pursue this in your own development? How did you find it in yourselves?
Tell me about the word accountability.
Accountability of recognizing I feel loneliness and I feel isolation and I feel like I want more friends. I need to do something about it and then going to do it.
Well, you said yourself, there's some guys who are like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
And that's the first lesson of the man box. I don't need that. So some men don't need that. I see you, brothers. You don't need it. You're good. But millions of us do. And among those millions, there are millions who say, I don't need that. So ask yourself this question. When you say, I don't need that, does that answer come up so fast that you don't even self-reflect about whether you do or don't? Like, for me, accountability is a beautiful word because it's actually a mutual word. I'm accountable to myself, but I'm also accountable to the people in my life.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. Yeah.
Mark and I had a part of what emerges out of this stuff was my wife's really getting frustrated with me because I never plan anything.
Yes.
I never plan a restaurant. I never plan a vacation. I never plan anything. I'm always like, okay, but I don't do it. Mm-hmm. Why do we not do that? And some other guy was like, yeah, we got that issue at home too. During that conversation, Mark said, well, I have some favorite places and you have some favorite places. Let's just cross-pollinate and then we can take our wives to places they haven't been. But also, will you hold me accountable?
Yeah.
So the accountability is not, uh-oh, you screwed up. The accountability is not, I'll circle back and ask you about that later. So we can hold accountability for ourselves, but we also hold it for each other. Mm-hmm. And as a community of men, the question of how do I decide I need to go for a walk ultimately is, am I going to let the world boss me around about what self-reflection I can do, what part of myself I can actually stop long enough and ask, that feels kind of empty. It feels kind of lost. And I find myself having really hard-edged opinions about men and about meaning. And maybe I should just go talk with this about my friends on a walk. Maybe that stuff would soften up a little bit. Yeah. I'd get a little more freedom in that. So any man, there's little voices that we've held silent for a long time. Just let them talk a little bit. Let them say something. I'm not quite as, I don't have it quite as together as I like to believe I do.
Yeah, and you use the word accountability, but I also think there's maybe some responsibility not only to yourself, but we've touched on this a little bit, but the other people in your lives, your children, your family, your spouse, and everything. And this benefits all of that. That's the thing. People might think, oh, I go on a walk, I, can feel a little better, about things going on in my life and everything, but it has a dramatic impact on every relationship that you have. It makes you more easily be able to be vulnerable with people, which is, a lot of what this is about. And, other people in your lives notice it right away. I know my wife has said that she's noticed a change, since I've been not even just on the walks, but associating with Mark and, other friends in my life. And I feel more able to be vulnerable with my kids, even though they don't always love it. But, yeah. Dad's getting weird.
Do that.
But
anyway.
But at least, anyway, Dad, yeah. But at least it's not because I'm not able to share, be vulnerable with them. That's, we've at least removed that barrier. And now it's, maybe reestablishing or, changing that relationship in a way where they're comfortable with me sharing with them in a way that maybe I didn't in the past. Yeah. So
I'm also reminded of what's the single boom note that hits for men? It's don't tell me what to do. I'm not going to let my wife tell me that I need to communicate more emotionally. I'm not going to, don't tell me. That don't tell me is after growing up in a lifetime of being told. In man box culture, it's literally, no. That one little thing you did, you want an example of it. High school. How'd you carry your books in high school? Did you carry them down by your hip or did you carry them up against your chest? Because I guarantee you, my high school, if I'd walked down the hallway with my books held like this, I wouldn't have made it 10 feet before they were knocked out of my hands and I was pushed over and whatever. So know that we got really good at doing the performance the right way, but the bullying and the policing happened all our lives. So now here we are, knowing that there's we're thirsty in the desert. There's a glass of water right there. You're saying have a glass of water, and we're saying don't tell me what to do. Because we've been so trained to we're so sick of the culture that says, nope, you got that wrong too, and that wrong. And this is why the idea of feminism really pisses a lot of men off, because it's don't tell me what to do. Now, feminism is the F word that everybody's freaked out about, but honestly, it's just women saying the same thing. Don't tell me what to do. Because we've been telling them all their lives what to do. They've been telling it. The whole culture is resistant to the idea that we actually are in relationship with each other and we can actually have a better life if we just lean into that a little bit, right? So men have been policed. Men are resistant. Men are saying, don't tell me what to do. Men are saying, I don't need that. And men are saying, I don't have any friends. And I'm drinking too much. And I'm getting in arguments with people I supposedly care about. And I'm going down the rabbit hole of extremism because I need more bigger boogeymen to blame. I'm not going in here. I'm not looking. And that piece, we over here institutionally and structurally, we're writing articles. We're talking about statistics and data and all the stuff I brought. Way the fuck over here is friendship. Just friendship. It's a radical idea. When I go on walks, I'm not the leader. I don't talk about all this data stuff. I'm just a guy on a walk. I just want friends. No man is the leader, is the expert on those walks. We're all experts on our own lives. And we bring that. I'm the expert on Mark's life. And I'll share what I know about that. And it's a whole space over here. It's not part of that. It's not part of the isms and the identity politics and all that stuff, which, bless us, enough. We need a space where all the identity stuff is just not part of the equation. And men, I'm telling you, come on our walk. I don't care where you're coming from. If you want to just share what's going on for you, we just want you.
Yeah, and not the group that you're associated
We
with.
don't need it.
Not
You
the
can,
bucket.
if you need to share a little of that, please do. But honestly, we just want you.
Yeah.
We just want friends in our neighborhood. And if a man wants to start a walk anywhere in this country, do it because you want friends in your neighborhood. You want to have, I mean, I say this over and over again and in conversation with people, and sometimes they're like, yeah, okay, I get it, friends. And then at some point, a little thing happens and they go, oh.
Like, oh, you mean friends.
Fuck. You know, they get a little window into this idea that all the system, structure, work, things, ideas, interface, Facebook groups, it just goes away. Just set it over there. It's important to have it. But this is not that. This is a radical shift toward what was taken from us as men, and we can have it back like that.
That's a good call to action. I like that. We're coming up on time, so I want to be mindful of that. I want to thank you both for being here and sharing your perspectives. Any other messages you want to leave the audience with? We cover a lot.
Yeah. I would just say, you know, if you have any hesitations at all about coming on a walk, just come and walk, and you don't have to talk. You know, you can just come, listen, hold space for other men. And that is still one of the biggest gifts I think you can give to a walk, is just to hold space for another man. So
beautiful. And if you are in Cincinnati, Ohio, in your neighborhood, you can do this. You can do this today. Just come check out our little form letter. If you want to borrow some of it to use, you can do this now, and your life will be fundamentally different and more beautiful, more resourced, more. I'm not lying. I'm not lying.
Shout out Cincinnati. Get after it.
Come on, Cincinnati. We'll put you on the webpage. We'll give an email address. People can find you. They can join you on your walk.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
yeah, this is
Thank
amazing.
you, Henry.
Really glad we got to cover that.
Yeah.
It's really a privilege for Under the Hood Talk community, and super important. And I learned a lot too.
I did as well.
All right.
That's a wrap. Yeah. So what do you think it means to be a good man? What